Good evening, friends. So, today's chapter is In Surrender Lies Victory. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. A case might be made for surrender as a path to victory in the worldly conflicts. The way of passive resistance, for example, in preference to armed resistance. But our point here concerns a higher kind of surrender, the surrender of our deluded egoic will to the wise and almighty will of God. Human will is, as Paramhansa Yogananda used to say, guided by whims and limited understanding. The divine will is in harmony with every level of reality. Though the divine will sometimes appears to us at first to be wrong, it proves always eventually to be for our highest good. Human will is inconsistent. It leads us one day to success and another to disaster. The divine will, when we surrender to it completely, though it is not always easy to do so, always brings us deep inner peace and joy in the end. Jesus Christ demonstrated this perfect surrender to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was captured and imprisoned. Preparatory to his crucifixion, he went apart from the others to pray and asked them to pray also. But when he returned to them, he found them asleep. Out of his love for them, he excused them, saying, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He then urged them again, saying, "Watch and pray." Their weakness in those circumstances was particularly sad, and the disciples themselves must have regretted it bitterly later on. We all know the symptoms of human weakness, though we may excuse them in ourselves, saying, "Well, after all, I am only a human." But what are the signs of true strength? We find in all cases that these are the fruit of a life wholly surrendered to God. The Bhagavad Gita lists these signs in the 30th chapter. So, what are these signs? Humbleness, truthfulness, harmlessness, patience, and honor, reverence for the wise, purity, constancy, control of self, contempt for sense delights, self sacrifice, perception of the certainty of ill in birth, old age, and frail mortality, disease, the ego's suffering and sin, detachment, lightly holding thoughts of home, children, and wife, those ties which bind most men, an ever tranquil heart, heedless of good or adverse fortune, with the will upraised to worship me alone unceasingly, loving deep solitude and shunning noise of foolish crowds, calm focus on the self, perceived within and in infinity. These qualities reveal true wisdom. Prince, all that is otherwise is ignorance. Thus, through the Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So, surrender to God's will is the key. God's will should be done, not my will. So, to explain this, I'll just narrate 2-3 stories. So, First thing, the last year, November, we all celebrated the 20th anniversary of Ananda, India. And during that time, Bhavani is not here today. Bhavani told me that Mansi ji, we have to cook in the master kitchen almost for 200 to 250 people for 2 to 3 days. So I was very, very tense. That I told her that Bhavani, we have already cooked for 50 to 100 people, but for 200 to 250 people, it will be little tough for me. But she said, no, no, Mansi ji, we should do this. I said yes to her because Master always says yes to life. But I was very, very tense from inside. So I went home and I prayed to Master. So Master, there is a very small kitchen. You have seen the kitchen downstairs. So cooking the 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and tea, coffee, and everything should be on time. For 200 to 250 people, we have small chullas, 2, 3, but still it was a very cumbersome task. Big patilas was there. So I prayed to Master. I prayed very intensely. So in my meditation, I've seen that Master is standing in that kitchen and cooking, and I'm just standing behind. From that moment onwards, I was very, very happy. So I was just out of my tension that I'm not doing anything. God is the doer, and the work will be done because He is doing everything through me. I'm not doing anything. And everything went very well, and everything was on time. It was for 200 to 250 people. Food was good. So it was Master's grace. So second thing, during COVID, so we both are doctors. So we are physicians as well. So during COVID, we were taking rounds for almost 80 to 100 people in the wards, in the ICUs. So I was seeing daily that people are dying. 20 years, 30 years, 25 years, young men, newly married. I was counseling their relatives that everything will be fine. They were on ventilator. So few wives, they were just 6 months pregnant. Few newly married. Few months have gone. So I was very, very worried. So in the night, I was praying to Master, why this all is happening? In spite of all the efforts, we are not able to save people. Whosoever has to go, the person is going, in spite of the best of the efforts that we are putting. So I was very, very tense, and I prayed, I was worried. Of course, I wanted an answer from Master. So I just prayed, I did my meditation, I slept. So I had a very rare dream, almost I think 2-3 years back. So in the dream, I have just seen the post-COVID time. Just the people were there in a garden. They were sitting under the trees, very gloomy faces. Of course, the COVID was finished and people were there. Everybody has lost their loved ones, one or another. So in the small room, Dr. Amar was with me and we were just roaming there, seeing people. So there was 1 or 2, 3 rooms. In one room, there were 2 kids, very small, chubby boys, 2-3 years. So I have seen them from a distance. I wanted to see them from close. So I went inside. So they were not alive. They were just lying down, very lively, but they were made of mud or dust. So I just touched them out of curiosity. They are looking lively, but they are not alive. So the moment I touched them, they came to life. And they were giggling, smiling. And the moment I removed my hands, again they were of dust. Then again I touched them. I just touched them with my hands. Again they were laughing and giggling. So I didn't understand this. So then my gaze shifted to the hospital prayer room. There was always a small prayer room or small mandir, you can say, in every hospital. So there I was praying. My gaze shifted from there to there. So I was praying and suddenly Master appeared in front of me. But I was not able to see him completely, only his feet. And he was wearing white kurta pajamas, chappals. I would just remember him very clearly now itself also. So I just did give him Dandvat Pranam that we do in India. So I asked him, why Master, why this is happening? Then he told me, Mansi, this is karma. You cannot do anything. They have to pass through this. This is God's plan. So this has to happen. And in the meantime, few people were coming towards that room. So I just hold the master's hand. Master, people are coming. And suddenly he vanished. And I just opened my eyes. So I understood from that dream that our bodies are just made of dust. Soul, when it enters the body, we are alive. When it leaves the body, we are just again made of dust. So, soul never dies. Only the body is dying. So, this last year I shared this dream with Jyotish and Deviji also. Deviji wanted me to share this dream with everyone. So that was a complete surrender to the God's will that we should exercise. And third story is about Ladi Mahashay. One time the Ladi Mahashay was just taking a bath and she was coming out with a disciple out of the Ganges, and suddenly he told his disciple, please store a piece of robe. The disciple was very surprised that why the Ladi Mahashay is saying nothing has happened to store a piece of your robe. He was so surprised that he was not able to do it quickly. That in the meantime, a big brick has fallen on Ladi Mahashay's feet and the blood was coming out. And Ladi Mahashay, he just tore his own robe and he just bandaged his feet. The disciple was asking Ladi Mahashay, Master, you was knowing this, that this has to come. Why didn't you stop it? Ladi Mahashay told, whatever has to come, it has to come. If we stop our karma now, it will hit harder another time. So, complete surrender to God is the key. God's will should be done, not our will. Thank you, friends.
So, when the subject of surrender comes often to a person who is, let us say, schooled in a Western thinking, might even think like, why should I surrender? What is the, I have a free will, so what is the need to surrender? And if that question comes to our mind, then another question we should ask ourselves is that are we really happy? Or are we really fulfilled? Or are we feeling that peace and calmness and tranquility at all times? And if the answer is not yes, then that is precisely the reason why surrender to God's will is so important. Because without that, as we listened to the words of Swami also, that in the beginning it might appear that it is very difficult. But when we say that, okay, I want to do my will, then Yogananda said, often that will is coming from our subconscious minds that we have already done in the past. And it is based on our whims and fancies. And as a result, it is going to give us nothing but more bondage. That will never give us freedom. But on the other hand, if we go by divine will, we will ultimately be going into greater harmony, greater peace, and greater joy. In fact, if you refer to Swami Kriyananda's own life, there was a time when Swami Kriyananda felt that as a child he was very happy. But as he was growing up, he felt he was not that happy. He was rather getting more grim and more dry in his nature. And he wasn't able to understand why was it that way. Because as a child, he knew that he was so happy. He had a lot of enthusiasm. He had a lot of joy. So what happened in growing up? And then he also shared this with Master Yogananda. And Yogananda said, Walter, you need to develop devotion. Because Swami himself said that it was his nature was very intellectual. And as a result, because of that too much of intellectuality, he was becoming dry. And he had to, work on himself to develop that devotion. And as he was working on that, as he was practicing to develop devotion, one day he heard masters telling to somebody, look how I have changed Walter. And Swami Kriyananda actually felt that was the case, because although he was thinking that he was practicing the teachings and was working on himself. But what was happening behind the scenes was that as he was opening himself up more and more to his guru, or you can say he was surrendering himself to the guru was bringing that change in him. And often Swamiji reiterated this fact that you don't have to do much. God will do everything. All you have to do is just open yourself. Give him a chance. Often Swami used to say that we say, okay, we have to struggle a lot in this life and we are working so hard. He said, why can't we give God a chance? Yes, we will be struggling, we will be working hard, but can we do little work in opening our hearts also? And that is what exactly that surrender means, because that is the subject of surrender. But is this surrender passive in nature? Swami again said, no, this is not passive. It's not like, because in India sometimes we do get carried away with this kind of thinking, because Swami often used to share this story where this man was not at all serious with his spiritual work, and he was always, joking and taking everything casually and lightly. And Yogananda told him that, you need to be little serious, my dear friend. You need to work hard, and you need to be little serious on your spiritual path. And this disciple said, sir, I want to do that, but it can only happen with your blessings. And in India, Swami said everybody was so happy, so pleased with that answer, that okay, only with the blessings this can happen. But then Yogananda actually said, my friend, my blessings are there, God's blessings are there, it is your blessings which are missing. And that was the reason. So that kind of surrender is not a passive surrender, but it is a kind of active cooperation with God's will, one can say. And I'll give you an example. Just a day before yesterday, I was preparing for one lecture. I'm a teacher in a medical college, so I have to prepare for my lectures sometimes. So, the thing is that, okay, I thought that, okay, let us bring God into it. How can we do this together? If we are surrendering to God, how can we bring God into our daily life? So how this happened was that, although it was always a temptation, because on the subject these days on Google, if you do a chat GPT, or let us say go on anything, you will get n number of PowerPoint presentations, because somebody has already done that in the past, and many more presentations are already there. You can just pick it up and give it a lecture on that, and it will become very easy. And nobody will question you also, because that is how things are going. But then I said, somehow this is not making the subject simple to the students. So how can we make it more simpler? So that was my question. So I said, okay, God, let us do it together. And as I was talking to God internally and trying to make my PowerPoint presentation, I was able to get more, articles on the subject. I read a book which was available online. And slowly, it started working out, and the presentation actually became very good. And in a way, it was much simpler, because what is the job of a teacher at the end? Basically to simplify the subject for the students. Otherwise, books are always there. So only thing which a teacher is doing is how can it make the subject more simple to understand for the students. And in that way, giving the task to God and what is it that He wants to do through us can actually help us do our task much more effectively and much more, in a better way. So it was a kind of putting it into practice. So just to, bring it to closure, the surrender here is, first of all, not passive. This is where we involve actively and ask God, how can we do it together? And at the same time, if you see, sometimes one can even have this fear, oh, I'm not that perfect. Oh, I have so much of flaws in me. How can God use me as a channel? Oh, I think only pure souls can ask God, and only God can go work through pure channels. But it's not like that. Swami Kriyananda at one time said, only a master is perfect. If you see, none of us is perfect. None of us can be. Only a master who has become one with God can only be perfect. But that is to say that we all are masters in making, because that is our destiny, if you see. At one point, Swamiji was acting in a small tableau where since he was having a beard in those days, so everybody said, you can become you can play the role of Christ, Jesus Christ. Because so at the end of the show, Master asked him, Yogananda, how did it go? And Swami said, sir, I didn't have much to do. It was just, I was just sitting there on the stage. But people in the end said to me that, yeah, you were looking like an original Jesus Christ. But I said, rather than looking like Christ, I would like to become Christ-like. But to that, Master said, oh, that will come. And Swami said, as a matter of fact, and so casually he remarked that, which is to say, it was not a personal remark to Swami Kriyananda, but he said it's a remark to each one of us, that we can all become Christ-like, and that will come. Ultimately, that is the destiny of every soul, because every soul has come from God, and ultimately every soul will merge back in God. So he said, don't think about your flaws at that time. Rather, he said, when we tune into God's light, sometimes those flaws can become more stronger. Rather, they will shine more strongly. It is as if, he used to give this example of the stained glass windows, where, let's say, when the sun is not shining behind the stained glass windows, and everything is looking like a gray hue. But if, let us say, there is more dust or some mud particles on the glass, and when the sun starts shining on the other side, those dust particles they become more visible. Which is to say that because the light is shining bright through them, those flaws, if which are there in us, in all of us, may sometimes come out and start looking like more brighter. And Swami said, don't worry about that, because once they will become more visible to us, you will be able to work on them. And you can, even Yogananda said, it is all right to tell God that, God, you are playing this role through me, even if certain mistakes are happening. Next time, he said, you will be able to do it better, because you are allowing God to work through you, and you are becoming a channel. So if you see, surrender is not only helping us in doing our act better, but at the same time, one day, those flaws will also be taken care of. And finally, at one time, if you see, Swami was working in his room, and he was so busy, because we know that he wrote hundreds, almost 200 or 150 plus books, and he was working on music, he was editing, and he was lecturing and writing so many other things. So he was not getting time to clean the window of his room because it was having all that mud which was splattered because the rain had just come a few days back. And he was like postponing the cleanup of the window. And after 2 weeks, when he could not resist more, because although he was so busy, so one day he just got up and he washed the window completely clean, and it was looking very beautiful. And when he was looking at the window from the other side, he felt, oh wow, now this window is looking so good and it's so beautiful. But then he realized why that window was looking so beautiful. Because he could see on the other end the beautiful scenery, and actually the window was not visible now. The only thing which was visible through the window was the beautiful scenery which was on the other end. And that is what he said. We all will become when we allow that light to flow through us. So one day, what will happen is that all that flaws, all that mud will eventually get cleared up, and you will see that you will become a pure channel. You will become a window which is as beautiful as that window, where only God's light will shine through you. So I think that should be the goal of our life, in complete surrender, as Mansi ji was sharing. Whether we are working in our day-to-day life, whatever is your nature of job, even if you are cooking for that matter in kitchen, involve God in that daily activity. Do not keep God restricted only to your meditations. And if we say, okay, God, how can we do it together? How can we do this cooking together? How can we, drive on the road together? How can we maybe write an article together, or maybe write a mail together? You will be amazed that by just giving him a chance and just asking yourself, what is it that God wants to do through me? Because you are an equally adorable channel as any other great saint that who has lived on the planet, whether it was Krishna or Yogananda. So don't, as Swami said, don't sell yourself short, and see that, we are all Christ in the making. Thank you, friends. Joy to you.